Our first case takes us back to the early 20th century in the rugged highlands of Northumbria. On the evening of the 7th of September 1910, Edward Parker, a local from the hamlet of Greenwell, planned a trip with his 5-year-old son Eddie to visit relatives who lived on a secluded estate near the village of Dunley. The journey began on a chilly Saturday before a regional holiday. They boarded a train and arrived at Dunley around 7 p.m. After disembarking, the pair set off on foot, trekking roughly 4 miles through winding lanes that led deep into a forested valley near the ancient Crowthorne Hills. After nearly 2 hours of walking, they reached an old way station, now in ruins, where soldiers had once trained near a disused rifle range further up the valley. Reports from that evening describe it as unseasonably warm, so much so that when only a quarter of a mile remained, Edward stopped to grab refreshments at a small canteen. By a stroke of fate, Eddie's grandfather, Samuel, along with his 14-year-old nephew, Arthur, had also arrived there. Samuel was asked to relay a message to his wife to be ready for the boys, and without delay, he dashed back toward the estate. Eager to join, little Eddie bolted off with Samuel toward the distant mansion, even as dusk began to settle. At a critical point, the boys were forced to cross 2 makeshift plank bridges, one of which was missing a handrail. It is believed that fear overtook Eddie on the half-finished journey, and when his cries filled the twilight, he decided to return to his father at the way station. Shortly thereafter, Samuel and Edward, realizing that Eddie was missing, frantically combed the area. Initial searches lasted nearly 20 minutes before local militia joined in. At midnight, the search was temporarily halted, allegedly to avoid further mishaps, and resumed at 4 a.m. With police and villagers now involved, the frantic hunt stretched on for weeks. Despite tireless efforts, no trace of young Eddie was found. Early theories suggested that he might have tumbled from one of the bridges into a nearby stream or wandered off into the woods. Later, suspicions arose that he could have been abducted, given that local itinerant families were prevalent in the area. The national press soon caught wind of the incident, and a local newspaper even offered a reward equivalent in modern value to several $1,000s, urging anyone with a clue to come forward. In a twist that deepened the mystery, Edward, tormented by the possibility that his son might still be alive, returned to search the highlands. One determined local, a Mrs. Harcourt, whose husband managed a nearby estate, claimed that after several sleepless nights, she dreamt of the precise spot where Eddie might be found. Persuading her reluctant husband to join her, they set off on a misty Sunday morning in early October. After a long, arduous climb to a ridge high above the valley, they stumbled upon a heartbreaking sight: the skeletal remains of a small child, presumed to be Eddie. The body, discovered at an elevation of 720 meters, a climb of nearly 500 meters from the ruins, was declared a victim of exposure and exhaustion. Yet the baffling question remained: how had a frail 5-year-old, so visibly tired and alone, reached such an inaccessible height? Some began to whisper that perhaps Eddie was not alone on his journey, and that someone, or something, had taken him up there. Even Edward admitted that he had once been within sight of the spot where the body was eventually discovered, though he failed to notice anything amiss at the time. Next, we turn our attention to an incident that occurred on a remote coastal outcrop in the early 1900s. Lighthouses, by their very nature, tend to be isolated and steeped in solitude, and their keepers often lead lives marked by isolation. In the winter of 1908, on the rugged, storm-battered coast of Westhaven in northern Scotland, 3 seasoned men who maintained the Beacon Point Lighthouse vanished without a trace. The lighthouse, completed in 1907 and towering 80 feet above the turbulent seas, was vital for guiding transatlantic vessels safely into harbor. That fateful winter, the 3 men, Robert McClellan, Edward Ned Carrington, and the infrequently stationed Thomas Lyle, were on duty when an unexpected fog rolled in. The mainland, from which the lighthouse was routinely monitored by telescope, could only view it clearly on sporadic clear days. On the 19th of December 1908, amid an eerie calm, the lighthouse suddenly fell silent. When relief crews arrived on the 25th of December, they found the lighthouse deserted. The interior bore signs of a hurried departure. Plates of stew and potatoes were left on the table, clocks had inexplicably stopped, and an overturned chair hinted at disorder. 2 of the 3 heavy woolen coats belonging to the missing men were nowhere to be seen. Adding to the confusion, the strict protocol dictated that at least 1 keeper must always remain behind. So why had all 3 left at once? And why had 1 man left his coat behind? Some speculated that an unseen force or a misinterpreted signal had lured them away. When the relief keeper, Joseph Burns, reported the discovery back to the mainland, a cryptic telegram was sent stating, "A dire mishap has occurred at Beacon Point. Our crew has vanished. Immediate instructions required." Subsequent investigations pieced together that on the 19th, while the men's log recorded normal activities earlier that day, later entries hinted at moments of uncharacteristic behavior. One entry mentioned severe winds that, according to meteorological records, should not have been present. Others recorded that 1 keeper had been unusually quiet and another had been seen whispering anxiously to himself. The mystery deepened when local residents recalled that in the days preceding the disappearance, the island's ancient chapel, said to have been built in the 8th century by a revered hermit, had stirred a sense of foreboding among its visitors. Despite extensive searches, no bodies or further clues were ever found, leaving the fate of McClellan, Carrington, and Lyle forever shrouded in enigma. In yet another puzzling case from a later era, we examine the baffling disappearance of a well-respected gentleman in rural Yorkshire in the early 1980s. Harold Benson, aged 42, was known throughout the county as a devoted family man and reliable local businessman. On a crisp afternoon, he embarked on a routine trip to the town market near the picturesque village of Alderley. His neighbor, a kindly woman named Mavis, recalled seeing Harold at 2:15 p.m. as he set off on foot toward the town center. However, when Harold failed to return home by evening, his concerned family reported him missing. 5 days later, on the 12th of June 1982, a local laborer discovered a body at the top of a steep embankment near an old refuse heap behind the town's abandoned textile mill. The scene was as perplexing as it was grim. Harold's body was found in an odd position atop a 15-foot pile of discarded materials, suggesting that he might have been lifted there, an impossibility without assistance. There were no signs of struggle, and items of clothing were disarranged in an unusual manner. His tie was askew, his trousers creased oddly, and notably, his overcoat was buttoned incorrectly. Investigators ruled out natural causes or a typical heart attack, but the placement of the body and the peculiar state of his belongings left more questions than answers. Friends and family struggled to accept that a gentle, community-oriented man could vanish in such an inexplicable manner, and even local authorities admitted that they had never encountered a case as confounding as Harold's disappearance. Another chilling disappearance took place in the remote reaches of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. On a chilly autumn afternoon in October 1996, Dr. Leonard Myers, a well-educated theologian and university professor, decided to venture into the wilderness for a solitary hiking trip. Accompanied only by his close friend and colleague Martin Clark, Dr. Myers set out to explore a little-known area near the rugged peaks of the Highmoor Range. After a morning's hike and a brief rest at a scenic overlook, the two parted ways to cover more ground. Martin, who was assisting with equipment, continued a short distance away while Dr. Myers lingered near a mossy boulder field. When Martin returned after 15 minutes, Dr. Myers had vanished without a trace. Exhaustive searches were launched immediately, involving local law enforcement, experienced mountain rescue teams, and even helicopter units equipped with thermal imaging. Yet, despite a relentless 5-day search, no sign of Dr. Myers or any hint of his whereabouts was ever discovered. His backpack and hiking boots were found near the trailhead, but his identity as a renowned scholar made it hard to imagine that he would simply wander off intentionally. Some speculated that his frail condition might have led to an unexpected collapse, while others whispered about the possibility of foul play or even a strange natural phenomenon unique to the high-altitude wilderness. Yet another disappearance comes from the rugged forests of northern England. In November 2015, 73-year-old Arthur Donovan, a seasoned hiker and longtime resident of the border region near the Peaks Higher National Park, set off on a solo trek. Arthur was no stranger to the wild, having navigated these trails for decades. On that overcast day, however, heavy fog enveloped the woodland, and soon Arthur became separated from his group. When he failed to return to his parked car by early evening, an immediate and massive search operation was launched, involving local volunteer search teams, trained dogs, and even support from aerial reconnaissance units. Despite these efforts, no trace of Arthur was found until 3 days later, when his remains were discovered in a clearing on the outskirts of the park. Curiously, the area where he was found had been thoroughly scoured by rescuers, leaving investigators baffled as to how his body could have been missed during the initial search. One of the most modern and puzzling cases occurred in the lush, treacherous terrain of the Amazon basin. In February 2017, 25-year-old Mateo Alvarez embarked on an eco-tour through the dense rainforest surrounding the newly established Mirador National Reserve in northern Brazil. Mateo had joined a guided expedition with a local adventure company and was last seen at approximately 8:45 p.m. near his cabin, a modest structure built on the outskirts of the reserve. When the guides discovered that Mateo was missing the next morning, they immediately mobilized the park rangers, who launched a grid search through the impenetrable jungle. The native communities, steeped in local legends of forest spirits, even suggested that Mateo might have incurred the wrath of an ancient deity said to protect the land. Despite the extensive search, including the participation of 2 local shamans who conducted ceremonial rites with offerings of cigars, local spirits, and handmade tokens, no trace of Mateo was found for several days. Then, in a bizarre turn of events, a single sock was discovered in a muddy ravine, prompting the rangers to concentrate their efforts in that area. 2 nights of ritual ceremonies later, Mateo reappeared, disoriented and claiming he had been guided by a troop of capuchin monkeys through a maze of hidden jungle paths. His account, as well as the local shaman's insistence that the forest spirit had held him captive, remains one of the most debated cases in the region's recent history. In our final case from recent years, we recount the mysterious disappearance of 27-year-old Samantha Sam Reed, an avid hiker with a distinctive star tattoo that made her instantly recognizable on the trails of the Cascades in Washington state. On the crisp morning of the 3rd of August 2018, Sam set off alone to summit Mount Horizon, a lesser-known peak along the winding Mountain Loop Highway. Her plan was simple: begin at 8:30 a.m. and return by 5 p.m. Later that day, her boyfriend, Mark, sent her a reassuring text message. However, as the day turned into evening and Sam still had not returned, Mark's anxiety grew. By 10 p.m., after driving from the city to the trailhead, he noticed that her blue hatchback was still parked at the lot, a sign that she hadn't left the area at all. Mark joined the growing search party, which eventually involved over 70 volunteers, multiple dog teams, and thermal imaging-equipped helicopters. Despite exhaustive efforts that stretched over 22 days, no clear evidence emerged. Footprints were found along one narrow ridge, and a few personal items, like a scarf and a compass, turned up near a rocky outcrop, but nothing conclusive was discovered. Mark recalled that Sam had once mentioned feeling uneasy about this particular trail, and that she'd even joked about needing extra luck to navigate its unpredictable routes. The case left everyone wondering how someone as experienced as Sam could vanish so completely, eluding even the most sophisticated search methods. Each of these cases leaves us with more questions than answers. Were these disappearances the result of tragic accidents in unforgiving environments, or is there an element of something far more inexplicable at work? As we continue our investigation into these baffling mysteries, we invite you to share your thoughts, theories, or any similar cases you might know of. Your support and engagement mean everything to us. Thank you for watching, and if you found today's exploration intriguing, please like and subscribe for more in-depth investigations. Stay safe, keep questioning, and I look forward to uncovering more mysteries with you in the new year.